William sat in his favorite leather chair, watching the rain streak down the window of their suburban home. The evening news droned on in the background, but his mind was elsewhere. Something had been bothering him for weeks now, a nagging feeling that he couldn't quite shake. His wife Camilla had been acting differently lately, and he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. They had been married for 15 years, and William prided himself on knowing Camilla better than anyone else in the world. He could read her moods like a favorite book, predict her reactions to almost any situation. But, lately, she seemed like a stranger in their own home. There were small changes at first, things that might seem insignificant to an outsider, but stood out to William like neon signs. Camilla had always been methodical about her daily routines. She would wake up at 6:30 every morning, make coffee for both of them, and sit at the kitchen table reading the local newspaper while William got ready for work. But over the past month, she had started waking up earlier, sometimes as early as 5 in the morning. When William asked her about it, she would give vague answers about wanting to get an early start on her day or needing some quiet time to think. The coffee routine had changed too. Instead of their usual shared morning ritual, Camilla would already be dressed and ready to leave when William came downstairs. She would hand him a travel mug of coffee and kiss him on the cheek, but there was something distant in her eyes, as if her mind was already somewhere else entirely. William worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown, a job that required attention to detail and pattern recognition. These same skills that served him well in his professional life were now making him acutely aware of every small change in his personal life. He noticed that Camilla had started carrying her phone with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She would check it frequently throughout their conversations, and, when it buzzed with notifications, she would glance at it with an expression he had never seen before. Their evening conversations, once filled with discussions about their days, their plans for the weekend, or random thoughts about life, had become shorter and more superficial. Camilla would ask about his day at work, listen politely to his responses, and then excuse herself to take care of some household task or another. She seemed restless, always finding something that needed to be done rather than simply sitting and talking with him. The changes weren't limited to her behavior patterns. William had also noticed physical changes that puzzled him. Camilla had always been conscious about her appearance, but she had never been particularly concerned with fashion or expensive clothes. She preferred comfort over style, choosing practical outfits that suited her work as a part-time librarian at the local elementary school. But, recently, she had started buying new clothes, more stylish and expensive than her usual choices. Last Tuesday, William had come home to find several shopping bags in their bedroom, filled with items he had never seen before. There was a beautiful silk scarf that must have cost more than Camilla usually spent on clothes in an entire month, a pair of designer sunglasses, and a bottle of perfume that smelled nothing like the subtle vanilla scent she had worn for years. When he asked her about the purchases, she mentioned something about treating herself and quickly changed the subject. The financial aspect bothered William more than he cared to admit. As the family's accountant, both professionally and personally, he was very aware of their budget and spending patterns. The new purchases didn't fit with their usual financial planning, and when he checked their joint account, he found several transactions that he didn't recognize. The amounts weren't large enough to cause financial strain, but they were frequent enough to create a pattern that concerned him. Camilla had always been transparent about money. They had joint accounts, shared credit cards, and made all major financial decisions together. The idea that she might be making purchases without discussing them first was completely unlike her. William considered bringing up the subject directly, but something held him back. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the situation than just some unexpected shopping sprees. Their social life had changed as well. Camilla had always enjoyed their quiet evenings at home, watching movies together or reading in companionable silence. She had a small circle of close friends, mostly other teachers and librarians, and they would occasionally meet for coffee or attend local community events together. But, lately, Camilla had been going out more frequently, often on evenings when William was home and available to spend time with her. She would mention meeting a friend for dinner or attending a book club meeting, but the details were always vague. When William asked about her evenings out, she would give brief summaries that didn't quite satisfy his curiosity. He found himself wondering who these friends were and why he had never met some of them, despite Camilla's apparent closeness with them. The most troubling change, however, was in their physical relationship. William and Camilla had always maintained a healthy level of intimacy throughout their marriage, adapting to the natural changes that come with time and familiarity. But over the past few weeks, Camilla seemed distracted even during their most intimate moments. She would go through the motions, but her mind seemed to be elsewhere entirely. William tried to convince himself that he was overreacting, that these changes were simply the result of stress from her job or some other external factor. Camilla worked with children, and the school year could be demanding. Perhaps she was dealing with a difficult student or facing pressure from the administration. Maybe she was going through some kind of personal growth phase and needed space to figure things out. But deep down, William knew that something more significant was happening. His analytical mind couldn't ignore the patterns he was seeing, the way all these small changes seemed to point towards something larger. He found himself paying closer attention to Camilla's words and actions, looking for clues that might help him understand what was really going on. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table eating the pasta dish that Camilla had prepared, William decided to test his growing suspicions. He mentioned that his colleague James had invited them to a dinner party the following Saturday, knowing that Camilla usually enjoyed these kinds of social gatherings. To his surprise, she immediately declined, saying she already had plans for that evening. When William asked about her plans, Camilla's response was evasive. She mentioned something about a commitment she had made weeks ago, but couldn't provide any specific details when pressed. Her discomfort was obvious, and she quickly changed the subject to ask about William's day at work. The conversation felt forced and unnatural, leaving William with more questions than answers. After dinner, William retreated to his home office to work on some files he had brought home from the firm. But his concentration was scattered, and he found himself staring at the computer screen without really seeing the numbers in front of him. His mind kept returning to the changes in Camilla's behavior, trying to piece together a puzzle with too many missing pieces. He thought about their early years together, when they were newlyweds figuring out how to build a life together. Camilla had been open and communicative then, sharing her thoughts and feelings freely. She would tell him about her dreams for the future, her fears about different aspects of life, and her daily experiences in detail that sometimes bordered on overwhelming. William had loved that about her, the way she included him in every aspect of her inner world. Somewhere along the way, that openness had gradually decreased. William had attributed it to the natural evolution of their relationship, the way couples become more comfortable with silence and don't feel the need to share every thought. But now he wondered if the change had been more gradual and significant than he had realized. If the recent shifts in Camilla's behavior were simply the culmination of a longer process of emotional distance. The sound of Camilla's footsteps in the hallway brought William back to the present. She appeared in the doorway of his office, leaning against the frame in a way that would have seemed casual if not for the tension in her shoulders. She was holding her phone in her hand, and William noticed that her thumb was moving across the screen, possibly typing a message. She asked if he needed anything before she went to bed, her voice carrying the same polite tone she might use with a houseguest rather than her husband of 15 years. William looked up at her, studying her face for any sign of the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. She looked tired, but there was also something else in her expression, something that looked almost like guilt. William told her that he was fine and would be up soon, but as she turned to leave, he called her name. When she looked back at him, he almost asked the question that had been building in his mind for weeks. He wanted to ask her directly what was wrong, what was causing all these changes, what secret she might be keeping from him. But something in her eyes stopped him, a look that seemed to plead with him not to dig any deeper. Instead, he simply told her that he loved her, hoping that those words might open a door for her to share whatever was troubling her. Camilla's response was a soft smile and a whispered declaration of love in return, but the words felt hollow, like an echo of something that had once been real but was now just a memory. After Camilla left for their bedroom, William sat in his office for another hour, ostensibly working but actually thinking about his marriage and the woman he thought he knew so well. He realized that he had been living in a kind of denial, accepting Camilla's explanations and excuses because it was easier than confronting the possibility that something fundamental had changed between them. The rain had stopped while he was lost in thought, and the house was completely quiet except for the distant sound of Camilla moving around in their bedroom. William saved his work files and shut down his computer, but he didn't immediately head upstairs. Instead, he walked to the living room window and looked out at their neighborhood, where other houses stood with their windows glowing warmly in the darkness. He wondered if the people in those houses were dealing with similar situations, if there were other husbands and wives who had grown apart without realizing it, who were keeping secrets from each other while going through the motions of daily life. The thought was both comforting and deeply unsettling, suggesting that his experience might be common, but also that his marriage might not be as special or secure as he had always believed. When William finally went upstairs, he found Camilla already asleep, or at least pretending to be asleep. She was lying on her side, facing away from his side of the bed, her breathing steady but not quite natural enough to be convincing. William got ready for bed as quietly as possible, but as he slipped under the covers, he noticed that Camilla's phone was still on her nightstand, face down, but close enough to her hand that she could reach it easily. The sight of the phone bothered William more than it should have. Throughout their marriage, both he and Camilla had been casual about their phones, leaving them anywhere in the house and never worrying about privacy or secrets. They had each other's passcodes, though they rarely used them, and there had never been any sense of hidden communication or private conversations that couldn't be shared. But now the phone seemed like a barrier between them, a small rectangular object that might contain answers to all the questions that had been plaguing William for weeks. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Camilla's breathing and wondering what messages might be hidden in that device, what conversations she might be having that she felt she couldn't share with her own husband. Sleep came slowly for William that night, and when it finally did, his dreams were filled with images of doors that wouldn't open and conversations he couldn't quite hear. He woke up several times during the night, each time hoping to find some clarity about his situation, but morning brought only more questions and a growing sense that his comfortable life was built on foundations that were far less solid than he had ever imagined. The following morning brought no relief from William's growing anxiety. He woke up before his alarm, finding the space beside him in bed already empty and cold. The shower was running in the bathroom, and he could hear Camilla moving around, getting ready for another day that would likely bring more questions than answers. William lay in bed for a few extra minutes, trying to summon the energy to face what felt like an increasingly complicated situation. When he finally made his way downstairs, he found a travel mug of coffee waiting for him on the kitchen counter, still warm, but not hot. Camilla was nowhere to be seen, though he could hear her car starting in the driveway. Through the window, he watched as she backed out and drove away without the usual wave or acknowledgement that had been part of their morning routine for years. The absence of that small gesture felt disproportionately significant, like another piece of evidence that their relationship was changing in ways he didn't understand. At work, William found it difficult to concentrate on the financial reports and client accounts that usually demanded his full attention. His colleagues noticed his distraction during their morning meeting, and his supervisor asked if everything was all right at home. William assured everyone that he was fine, but the question lingered in his mind throughout the day. How obvious was his distress? Were the changes in his own behavior as noticeable as the changes he was seeing in Camilla? During his lunch break, William decided to take a different approach to his growing concerns. Instead of continuing to analyze Camilla's behavior from a distance, he would try to understand what might be causing her to act so differently. He began making a mental list of possible explanations for her recent changes, ranging from work stress to health concerns to relationship issues he might not be aware of. The possibility that Camilla might be dealing with health problems hadn't occurred to William before, but it suddenly seemed like a reasonable explanation for many of her behavioral changes. She could be experiencing something she didn't want to worry him with, perhaps waiting until she had more information before sharing her concerns. The secret of phone calls and text messages might be communications with doctors or medical professionals. The new clothes and attention to her appearance might be part of an effort to feel better about herself during a difficult time. This theory provided William with a sense of relief, but it also created a new kind of worry. If Camilla was dealing with health issues alone, it meant she didn't trust him to handle the information appropriately. It suggested that she saw him as someone who needed to be protected from difficult truths rather than as a partner who could provide support and assistance during challenging times. When William arrived home that evening, he found Camilla in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up when he entered and smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. There was something tired about her face, a kind of weariness that seemed to go deeper than simple fatigue from a long day at work. William set down his briefcase and walked over to her, placing his hands on her shoulders and looking directly into her eyes. He asked her how she was feeling, putting slight emphasis on the word feeling to give her an opening to share any health concerns she might be having. Camilla's response was automatic and dismissive, the kind of response people give when they don't want to engage with the real intent behind a question. She said she was fine, just a little tired, and asked about his day at work. William persisted gently, mentioning that she had seemed stressed lately and asking if there was anything bothering her that they should talk about. For a moment, Camilla's composure slipped, and William saw something that looked like panic flash across her face. But the expression was gone so quickly that he almost wondered if he had imagined it. She recovered smoothly, attributing any stress to the usual challenges of working with children and managing their household responsibilities. The conversation felt scripted, as if Camilla had prepared responses for exactly these kinds of questions. William realized that she had probably been expecting him to notice her behavioral changes and had ready explanations that would deflect his concerns without providing any real information. The sophistication of her deflection tactics was almost more troubling than the original behavioral changes, suggesting a level of premeditation that he found deeply unsettling. After dinner, William excused himself to take a walk around the neighborhood, something he rarely did but felt necessary to clear his head and think through his situation. The evening air was cool and crisp, and the physical activity helped him organize his thoughts in a way that sitting in his office had not. As he walked past the houses of his neighbors, he found himself wondering about the lives being lived behind those lit windows, the private dramas and personal struggles that every family probably dealt with in their own ways. He thought about his friend Marcus, who had gone through a difficult divorce 3 years earlier. Marcus had mentioned several times that the signs had been there for months before his wife finally told him she wanted to end their marriage, but that he had chosen to ignore them because acknowledging them would have meant admitting that his comfortable life was falling apart. William wondered if he was making the same mistake, choosing denial over the difficult work of confronting whatever was happening in his own marriage. When William returned from his walk, he found Camilla in their bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone in her hands. She was typing intently, and when she heard him coming up the stairs, she quickly finished whatever message she was composing and set the phone aside. The guilty expression on her face was unmistakable this time, and William knew that he couldn't continue pretending not to notice these obvious signs of secretive behavior. He sat down on the bed next to her, close enough that their knees were almost touching. He could smell the perfume she had been wearing lately, the expensive one that still seemed foreign and wrong to him. When he looked at her closely, he noticed that she was wearing makeup, even though they were home for the evening, and she rarely bothered with cosmetics unless they were going out somewhere special. William asked her directly who she had been texting, keeping his voice gentle but making it clear that he was serious about getting an answer. Camilla's response was immediate and defensive, claiming that it was just a friend from work asking about lesson plans for the following week. But her explanation sounded rehearsed, and she couldn't maintain eye contact while delivering it. The mention of work colleagues gave William an idea. He suggested that they invite some of Camilla's friends over for dinner the following weekend, mentioning that it had been a while since they had entertained and that he would enjoy meeting some of the people she worked with. Camilla's reaction was immediate and strong, though she tried to disguise it as casual disinterest. She claimed that her work friends were too busy for social gatherings and that mixing work relationships with home life wasn't something she was comfortable with. William found this response particularly puzzling because Camilla had always been social and had frequently invited colleagues and friends to their home in the past. Some of his favorite memories of their marriage involved dinner parties and casual gatherings where Camilla would cook elaborate meals and fill their house with laughter and conversation. Her sudden reluctance to include her current friends in their social life seemed to suggest that there was something about these relationships that she didn't want William to discover. That night, William lay awake long after Camilla had fallen asleep, thinking about the accumulating evidence that his wife was keeping significant secrets from him. Each individual incident might have been explainable on its own, but together they formed a pattern that was becoming impossible to ignore. The secret of phone use, the unexplained expenses, the changes in her appearance and social behavior, the defensive responses to his questions, all of these things pointed towards some kind of deception that was becoming more elaborate and sophisticated over time. The next few days brought more of the same behaviors, but William began paying closer attention to details he had previously overlooked. He noticed that Camilla's phone buzzed with notifications primarily during certain times of day, usually in the late afternoon and early evening. She would always check these messages immediately, sometimes excusing herself from conversations or activities to respond privately. William also began observing Camilla's moods more carefully, looking for patterns that might give him clues about what was really going on in her life. He noticed that she seemed happiest and most energetic after receiving certain text messages, and most anxious and distracted when she hadn't heard from someone for a while. Her emotional state seemed to be tied to her phone communications in a way that was completely unlike her normal patterns of behavior. On Thursday evening, William decided to conduct a small experiment. While Camilla was in the shower, he checked their joint credit card account online, looking for any transactions that might provide clues about her recent activities. What he found was both illuminating and deeply concerning. In addition to the clothing and cosmetic purchases he had already noticed, there were charges for restaurants he had never heard of, coffee shops in parts of town where Camilla had no apparent reason to be, and parking fees for downtown areas where she had never mentioned going. The most troubling discovery was a charge for a hotel room in the city, dated from the previous week when Camilla had told him she was attending a teacher training workshop. William remembered the evening clearly because he had offered to pick her up after the workshop, but she had insisted on driving herself and had returned home quite late, claiming that the training had run longer than expected. The hotel charge was for a single night, and the amount was significant enough to suggest a nice establishment rather than a budget option. William tried to think of innocent explanations for the charge, but none of them made sense. If the workshop had required an overnight stay, Camilla would have mentioned it in advance. If she had simply been too tired to drive home safely, she would have called him to let him know about the change in plans. The sound of the shower turning off interrupted William's investigation, and he quickly closed the browser window and returned to his normal evening activities. But the discovery of the hotel charge had shifted his understanding of the situation in a fundamental way. Whatever Camilla was hiding from him, it was not simply a matter of minor lifestyle changes or personal stress. The evidence suggested deception on a scale that could potentially threaten their marriage. When Camilla emerged from the bathroom, William studied her face carefully, looking for any sign that might help him understand what kind of person she was becoming. She looked refreshed and relaxed from her shower, but there was still that underlying tension in her posture that had become so familiar over the past month. She smiled at him and made casual conversation about her plans for the following day, but William found himself analyzing every word she spoke, looking for inconsistencies or signs of deception. The weekend brought a temporary change in their routine, but not the kind of relaxing break that William had been hoping for. Camilla announced on Friday evening that she needed to spend Saturday afternoon helping a friend who was moving to a new apartment. She would be gone for several hours, and she wasn't sure exactly when she would be home. William offered to help with the move, but Camilla quickly declined, saying that there were already too many people involved and that additional helpers would just get in the way. William spent Saturday afternoon alone in their house, trying to focus on household chores and personal projects, but finding his mind constantly wandering to questions about Camilla's whereabouts and activities. He realized that he was becoming obsessed with her deception, allowing it to consume mental energy that would be better spent on productive activities. But he also knew that he couldn't continue living with the uncertainty and growing suspicion that was poisoning his peace of mind. When Camilla returned home that evening, she seemed energized and happy in a way that William hadn't seen in weeks. She talked animatedly about her friend's new apartment and the success of the move, providing details that seemed genuine and spontaneous. For a brief moment, William wondered if he had been imagining problems that didn't actually exist, if his suspicious nature was creating drama where none was warranted. But as the evening progressed, Camilla's mood shifted back to the distracted, secretive pattern that had become her norm. Her phone buzzed several times during dinner, and each time she would glance at it with an expression of anticipation that felt inappropriate for someone who was supposed to be focused on spending time with her husband. William found himself feeling like a stranger in his own home, watching his wife live a life that seemed to exist largely outside of their relationship. Sunday morning brought an unexpected opportunity for William to gather more information about Camilla's recent activities. She announced that she needed to run several errands and would be gone for a few hours, giving William free access to their house and any information he might be able to discover in her absence. He waited until he heard her car disappear down the street before beginning what felt like an investigation into his own wife's secret life. William started his search in their bedroom, looking through Camilla's dresser drawers and closet for any evidence of activities or relationships he wasn't aware of. He found several items of clothing he had never seen before, all more expensive and stylish than her usual preferences. Hidden beneath some sweaters in the back of a drawer, he discovered a small jewelry box containing a pair of earrings that he had never seen her wear, along with a bracelet that looked expensive and definitely not like something she would have bought for herself. The discovery of the hidden jewelry felt like a significant breakthrough in William's unofficial investigation. The pieces were clearly gifts from someone, and the fact that Camilla had hidden them rather than wearing them openly suggested that she didn't want William to know about them. The style of the jewelry was elegant and sophisticated, the kind of gifts that someone might give to express romantic interest rather than casual friendship. William photographed the jewelry with his phone, wanting to document his discovery in case the items disappeared or were moved to a different location. As he was taking the pictures, he heard the sound of a car in the driveway and quickly returned the jewelry to its hiding place, arranging the sweaters exactly as he had found them. Camilla was returning home much earlier than expected, cutting short his investigation before he could explore other areas of the house. When Camilla entered the bedroom, William was sitting on the bed reading a book, trying to appear natural despite his racing heartbeat. She seemed relaxed and unsuspecting, chatting about the errands she had completed and asking about how he had spent his morning. William managed to engage in normal conversation, but his mind was focused on the hidden jewelry and what it might reveal about the secret aspects of his wife's life. The rest of Sunday passed quietly, but William found himself studying Camilla's behavior with new intensity, looking for any signs that might help him understand who had given her the expensive gifts he had discovered. He watched her hands, looking for tan lines or indentations that might indicate she regularly wore rings or bracelets when she was away from home. He observed her interactions with her phone, trying to determine if the timing of her messages corresponded with any particular patterns or routines. That evening, as they prepared for bed, William made a decision that would fundamentally change the course of his investigation. He realized that passive observation and subtle questioning were not providing him with the information he needed to understand what was happening in his marriage. If he was going to discover the truth about Camilla's secret life, he would need to take more direct action, even if it meant crossing boundaries that he had never imagined violating in their relationship. The thought of actively spying on his own wife was deeply troubling to William, but his need for answers had reached a point where ethical concerns were being overshadowed by the desperate desire to understand what was happening to his marriage. As he lay in bed that night, listening to Camilla's breathing and wondering what secrets she might be keeping from him, William began planning his next steps in what was becoming a complex investigation into the woman he thought he knew better than anyone else in the world. Monday morning arrived with an overcast sky that seemed to reflect William's increasingly dark mood about his marriage. He had spent most of Sunday night lying awake, planning how he might gather more concrete evidence about Camilla's secretive behavior without alerting her to his suspicions. The discovery of the hidden jewelry had convinced him that his concerns were justified, but he needed more information to understand the full scope of whatever deception was taking place. William's plan began with a careful observation of Camilla's routine during the early morning hours. He pretended to be asleep when she got up, listening to her movements through the house, and noting any deviations from her normal patterns. He heard her spend longer than usual in the bathroom, followed by what sounded like careful attention to her appearance in their bedroom. When he finally emerged from bed, he found that she had already left for work without the usual exchange of morning pleasantries that had characterized their relationship for years. At his office, William found it nearly impossible to focus on his work responsibilities. His mind kept returning to the hidden jewelry and what it might represent about Camilla's relationship with someone else. The earrings had been particularly troubling because they were clearly expensive and sophisticated, not the kind of casual gift that a friend might give. The bracelet had been even more concerning because it looked like the type of intimate jewelry that a romantic partner might choose. During his lunch break, William made a decision that felt both necessary and deeply uncomfortable. He called the elementary school where Camilla worked, planning to verify some of the details she had given him about her schedule and responsibilities. He spoke with the school's secretary, identifying himself as Camilla's husband, and asking about teacher training workshops that might require overnight stays. The information he received from the school was both illuminating and disturbing. According to the secretary, there had been no teacher training workshops in the past month that would have required teachers to stay overnight in hotels. In fact, most of the professional development activities for the current semester were scheduled to take place on school grounds during regular hours. The secretary seemed puzzled by William's questions, mentioning that she wasn't aware of any special training that Camilla had attended recently. This revelation confirmed William's worst fears about the hotel charge he had discovered on their credit card statement. Camilla had deliberately lied to him about her whereabouts that evening, creating an elaborate story about a teacher training workshop to cover up whatever she had actually been doing. The sophistication of the lie, complete with specific details about timing and duration, suggested that this was not an isolated incident of deception. William spent the rest of his workday in a state of emotional turmoil, alternating between anger at Camilla's deception and self-doubt about his own investigative methods. Part of him felt guilty for checking up on his wife's story behind her back, but a larger part of him felt justified in seeking the truth about behavior that was affecting their marriage. He realized that his relationship with Camilla had fundamentally changed from one based on trust and open communication to one characterized by suspicion and covert investigation. That evening, William decided to confront some of his suspicions more directly, though he was careful not to reveal the extent of his knowledge about Camilla's recent activities. When she arrived home from work, he mentioned that he had been thinking about their conversation regarding her friend who was moving, and asked for more details about the person and the moving process. He hoped that by asking for specifics, he might be able to verify whether this story was true or simply another fabrication. Camilla's response to his questions was confident and detailed, providing what seemed like genuine information about her friend's relocation from one apartment to another. She described the layout of both apartments, the challenges of moving furniture up narrow staircases, and the personalities of the other people who had helped with the move. Her account was so convincing that William began to wonder if he was becoming paranoid, seeing deception where none actually existed. But, as Camilla continued talking about the moving experience, William noticed small inconsistencies in her story that hadn't been apparent during her initial account. The timeline she described didn't quite match up with the hours she had been away from home, and some of the details about the location of the apartments seemed vague when he pressed for clarification. Most telling, when he suggested that they should have her friend over for dinner soon, Camilla quickly changed the subject without directly responding to his invitation. After dinner, William excused himself to work in his home office, but instead of focusing on client files, he began researching ways to verify some of the information Camilla had provided. He searched online for moving companies and apartment complexes in the areas she had mentioned, looking for any details that might help him confirm or refute her story. The process felt invasive and wrong, but his need for truth had overcome his concerns about privacy and trust. While William was conducting his research, he heard Camilla's phone ring in the kitchen. Her voice carried through the house as she answered the call, and he could tell from her tone that this was not a routine conversation with a family member or casual friend. She spoke in lower tones than usual, and he could hear her moving around the house, apparently seeking privacy for the conversation. The call lasted for nearly 20 minutes, far longer than her usual phone conversations during evening hours. When Camilla finished her call and joined William in his office, her demeanor had changed noticeably. She seemed energized and distracted, as if the conversation had been emotionally significant in some way. When William asked about the call, she mentioned that it was her sister checking in about family matters, but her explanation felt automatic and unconvincing. William had met Camilla's sister many times, and their conversations were typically brief and focused on practical matters rather than lengthy emotional discussions. The next few days brought more of the same patterns, but William began documenting the details more systematically. He started keeping notes about Camilla's comings and goings, her phone usage patterns, and any changes in her mood or behavior that might provide clues about her hidden activities. The process of documentation helped him feel more in control of the situation, but it also made him acutely aware of how much his marriage had deteriorated from its original foundation of trust and mutual respect. On Wednesday evening, William's investigation took an unexpected turn when he discovered that Camilla had left her phone charging in the kitchen while she took a shower. The opportunity for direct access to her communications was too tempting to ignore, despite his moral reservations about violating her privacy. With his heart racing, he quickly picked up the phone and attempted to unlock it using the passcode he thought she used for most of her accounts. To William's surprise, the passcode he tried didn't work. Camilla had apparently changed her phone's security settings, something she had never done in all their years of marriage. The fact that she felt the need to prevent him from accessing her phone was perhaps the most damning evidence yet that she was hiding significant information from him. William tried several other combinations that might be meaningful to Camilla, but none of them successfully unlocked the device. The sound of the shower turning off sent William into a panic, and he quickly returned the phone to its charging position, trying to arrange it exactly as Camilla had left it. His hands were shaking as he moved away from the device, and he realized that his investigative activities were taking an emotional toll that was affecting his ability to function normally. When Camilla emerged from the bathroom, William was sitting at the kitchen table reading a magazine, but his concentration was so scattered that he couldn't absorb any of the words on the pages in front of him. Thursday brought an opportunity for William to conduct a more thorough investigation when Camilla announced that she would be working late at the school, helping to prepare for a special event that was scheduled for the following week. She expected to be home around 8 o'clock, giving William several hours of uninterrupted time in their house. He decided to use this opportunity to search more systematically for evidence of whatever secret life Camilla was maintaining. William began his search in areas he hadn't previously explored, including Camilla's car, her purse, and various storage areas around their house. In the glove compartment of her car, he found receipts for restaurants and coffee shops that matched some of the credit card charges he had discovered earlier. The receipts were folded carefully and stored in a way that suggested Camilla was keeping them deliberately, possibly as mementos of significant occasions. One receipt was particularly interesting because it was from an upscale restaurant downtown, and the timestamp indicated that Camilla had been there during hours when she had told William she was working at the school. The total amount on the receipt was substantial enough to suggest that she had not been dining alone, and the restaurant was known for its romantic atmosphere rather than its casual dining options. In Camilla's purse, William found business cards for several establishments he didn't recognize, including what appeared to be an art gallery and a wine bar. There was also a small notebook containing handwritten notes that seemed to be personal reminders or thoughts rather than work-related information. Some of the entries were difficult to decipher, but William could make out references to specific dates and times, along with what looked like emotional reflections on various experiences. The most disturbing discovery came when William found a small calendar hidden in the back of one of Camilla's dresser drawers. The calendar was marked with various symbols and abbreviations that clearly had personal significance, but which were meaningless to William despite his intimate knowledge of his wife's usual habits and preferences. Several dates were circled in red ink, and others were marked with symbols that looked like hearts or stars. William photographed the calendar with his phone, hoping that he might be able to decipher its meaning with more careful analysis. The pattern of marked dates didn't correspond to any work schedule or family obligation that he was aware of, but they did seem to correlate with some of the evenings when Camilla had been away from home for extended periods. The calendar appeared to be a record of secret activities that she was tracking separately from her regular schedule. As William continued his search, he found additional evidence of a hidden life that was becoming increasingly complex and troubling. There were small gifts hidden in various locations around their bedroom, including items of jewelry, perfume, and clothing that he had never seen Camilla use or wear. Each discovery added to his growing understanding that his wife was involved in some kind of relationship or situation that she was deliberately concealing from him. The most shocking discovery came when William found a key hidden in the back of Camilla's jewelry box, behind the items he had discovered during his previous search. The key was small and appeared to be for a padlock or storage unit rather than a door or vehicle. It was attached to a keychain that bore the logo of a storage facility located across town, in an area where William couldn't think of any reason for Camilla to have business. William memorized the name and address of the storage facility, planning to investigate further when he had the opportunity. The existence of a secret storage unit suggested that Camilla's hidden activities were extensive enough to require physical space for items that she couldn't keep at their home. The implications of this discovery were staggering, suggesting a level of deception that went far beyond simple emotional infidelity or casual dishonesty. When Camilla returned home that evening, William was waiting for her in the living room, ostensibly reading a book, but actually observing her behavior for any signs that she might have detected his investigation. She seemed tired, but not particularly suspicious, chatting about her day at school and asking about his evening at home. William managed to engage in normal conversation, but his mind was focused on the storage facility key and what secrets it might unlock. That night, William lay awake planning his next investigative steps while listening to Camilla sleep beside him. He realized that his marriage had become a kind of elaborate detective story, with himself in the role of an investigator trying to uncover the truth about someone he had once trusted completely. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. He was working harder to understand his own wife than he had ever worked to understand any client's financial problems or business challenges. The weight of his discoveries was becoming emotionally overwhelming, and William found himself questioning not only Camilla's behavior, but also his own response to the situation. Part of him wondered if he should confront her directly with the evidence he had gathered, demanding honest answers about her secret activities. But another part of him felt compelled to continue investigating until he had a complete picture of whatever deception was taking place. William realized that his investigation had reached a critical point where he would need to make decisions about how far he was willing to go to uncover the truth. The storage facility key represented an opportunity to gather definitive evidence about Camilla's secret life, but using it would cross a line that might permanently damage their relationship, regardless of what he discovered. As he drifted off to sleep, William knew that the next few days would determine not only the future of his marriage, but also the kind of person he was willing to become in pursuit of the truth. Friday morning brought a gray, drizzly day that matched William's increasingly somber mood about his marriage and his investigative activities. He had made the decision during the night to visit the storage facility and use the key he had discovered, despite his reservations about the ethical implications of such an action. The need to understand what Camilla was hiding had overcome his concerns about privacy and trust, and he knew that he wouldn't be able to rest until he had explored every avenue for discovering the truth. William took a long lunch break on Friday, driving across town to the storage facility whose name and logo he had found on the mysterious key hidden in Camilla's jewelry box. The facility was located in an industrial area that he had never visited before, surrounded by warehouses and small businesses that seemed to cater to people who needed discreet, affordable storage solutions. As he pulled into the parking lot, William felt his anxiety spike, knowing that whatever he discovered in the next few minutes would fundamentally change his understanding of his marriage and his wife. The storage facility was larger than he had expected, with rows of identical metal units stretching across several acres. William walked through the facility, looking for unit numbers that might correspond to the key he carried in his pocket. The process took longer than anticipated, and he began to worry that he might not find the correct unit before his lunch break ended, and he needed to return to work. Finally, near the back of the facility, William found a unit whose number matched the tag on the key. The storage unit was small, perhaps 5 feet by 8 feet, with a standard padlock securing the metal door. William's hands were shaking as he inserted the key, part of him hoping that it wouldn't work, that this would all turn out to be an innocent misunderstanding. But the key turned smoothly, and the lock opened with a quiet click that seemed to echo through the quiet storage facility. What William found inside the storage unit was beyond anything he had imagined during his weeks of investigation and speculation. The small space was filled with items that told the story of a secret life that was far more complex and disturbing than simple infidelity. Against one wall, there were several boxes filled with documents, photographs, and personal items that seemed to span many years rather than just the recent months when William had noticed changes in Camilla's behavior. William opened the first box with trembling hands, finding photographs that showed Camilla in situations and with people he had never seen before. The photos appeared to span a period of several years, showing her at various locations around the city, often in the company of different men who seemed to be more than casual friends. The images were not overtly intimate, but they captured moments of apparent closeness and affection that suggested ongoing relationships that Camilla had never mentioned to William. One particular series of photographs showed Camilla at what appeared to be a formal dinner or gala, wearing an elegant dress that William had never seen and jewelry that didn't match anything in their shared jewelry collection. She was seated at a table with a well-dressed man who appeared to be in his 50s, and their body language suggested a level of familiarity and comfort that spoke of a long-standing relationship. The man had his arm around Camilla's shoulders in several of the photos, and both of them were smiling in a way that seemed genuine and relaxed. The documents in the boxes were equally revealing and disturbing. William found bank statements for accounts that he had never known existed, showing regular deposits and withdrawals that didn't correspond to any income or expenses that he was aware of. The amounts were significant, suggesting that Camilla had access to money that came from sources outside of her job at the elementary school and their shared household finances. There were also travel documents that showed trips to various cities and even some international destinations that Camilla had never mentioned to William. The dates on some of the travel documents corresponded to weekends when Camilla had told him she was visiting friends or attending professional conferences, but the actual destinations were far from their home city and clearly involved personal rather than professional activities. Perhaps the most shocking discovery was a series of letters and cards that appeared to be from multiple different men addressed to Camilla and expressing varying degrees of romantic interest and emotional attachment. Some of the letters were recent, written within the past few months, while others appeared to date back several years. The content of the letters suggested that Camilla had been maintaining multiple romantic relationships simultaneously, receiving gifts, attention, and apparently financial support from men who seemed to believe they had exclusive or at least significant relationships with her. William sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit, surrounded by evidence of his wife's elaborate deception, trying to process the magnitude of what he had discovered. The secret life that Camilla had been living was not a recent development triggered by marital problems or personal crisis, but rather an ongoing pattern of behavior that seemed to have existed throughout most, if not all, of their marriage. The sophistication and organization of her deception suggested someone who was skilled at maintaining multiple identities and relationships simultaneously. One letter in particular caught William's attention because it was dated just 2 weeks earlier and contained specific references to plans and activities that Camilla had hidden from William. The writer, who signed his name as David, mentioned looking forward to their upcoming weekend together and thanked Camilla for the wonderful evening they had shared at the restaurant downtown. This letter corresponded exactly with the weekend when Camilla had told William she was helping a friend move apartments, and the restaurant mentioned was the same one for which William had found a receipt in her car. Another letter, from someone named Michael, contained references to the storage unit itself and mentioned that he was happy to help Camilla pay for the space where she could keep items that were important to their relationship. This revelation explained how Camilla had been able to afford the storage unit without the expense appearing in their joint financial accounts, and it suggested that at least some of the men she was involved with were aware of her married status and were actively helping her maintain her secret life. As William continued reading through the letters and examining the documents, he began to understand that Camilla's deception involved not just emotional and physical relationships with other men, but also a complex web of financial arrangements that had allowed her to live far beyond the means that her teaching salary and their household budget would normally provide. The expensive clothes, jewelry, and other items he had noticed were gifts from her various romantic partners, and the unexplained charges on their credit cards represented only a small portion of her actual spending and lifestyle. The most disturbing aspect of William's discoveries was the realization that Camilla had been documenting and organizing her secret life with the same methodical attention to detail that she brought to her work as a teacher. The boxes contained calendars, appointment books, and what appeared to be a contact management system that helped her keep track of her various relationships and commitments. The level of planning and organization suggested that maintaining this double life was not a casual or impulsive behavior, but rather a deliberate and sustained effort that required significant time and energy. William found a small notebook that appeared to contain Camilla's personal thoughts and reflections about her various relationships. The entries were written in her familiar handwriting, but the content revealed a side of his wife that he had never known existed. She wrote about the excitement of new romantic connections, the challenge of managing multiple relationships without creating conflicts, and her strategies for maintaining the secrecy that allowed her double life to continue. One particularly painful entry described William as comfortable but boring, someone who provided stability and security but lacked the excitement and passion that she found in her other relationships. She wrote about feeling trapped in their marriage but unwilling to give up the financial security and social respectability that it provided. The entry made it clear that Camilla saw their marriage primarily as a convenient cover for her more exciting secret life, rather than as a meaningful partnership based on love and mutual commitment. Another entry revealed that Camilla had been using their home as a meeting place for some of her romantic relationships, entertaining men in their house during times when William was at work or away on business trips. The violation of their shared space felt almost as significant as the emotional betrayal, suggesting that no aspect of their married life had been exempt from her deception and manipulation. William also found evidence that Camilla had been sharing intimate details about their marriage with her various romantic partners, including information about their financial situation, their personal problems, and even intimate details about their physical relationship. The letters he read contained references to conversations where Camilla had apparently portrayed William as an inadequate husband who failed to meet her emotional and physical needs, justifying her infidelity by claiming that she was forced to seek outside relationships because of his shortcomings. The storage unit also contained items that appeared to be gifts that Camilla had received but hadn't yet decided how to incorporate into her public life with William. There were expensive pieces of clothing with tags still attached, jewelry in boxes that had never been opened, and luxury items that would have been impossible for her to explain if William had discovered them at home. The accumulation of these gifts painted a picture of multiple men competing for Camilla's attention by showering her with expensive presents. As William neared the end of his investigation of the storage unit contents, he found a folder containing what appeared to be Camilla's future plans for her secret life. There were printed emails discussing potential travel arrangements, apartment rentals in other cities, and even preliminary discussions about one of her partners helping her establish a new identity in a different state. The documents suggested that Camilla was considering permanently leaving their marriage, but was carefully planning her exit to ensure that she would have financial security and emotional support from her alternative relationships. The final item that William examined was a letter that Camilla had apparently written to herself, reflecting on her choices and the sustainability of her current lifestyle. In the letter, she acknowledged that her deception was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain and that she would eventually need to make decisions about which relationships to prioritize. She wrote about William with a mixture of guilt and resentment, recognizing that he didn't deserve the treatment he was receiving, but also expressing frustration with what she perceived as his failure to provide the excitement and validation she craved. William spent over an hour in the storage unit, reading through documents and examining the evidence of his wife's elaborate deception. When he finally locked the unit and returned to his car, he felt emotionally numb, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had discovered. The woman he had been married to for 15 years was essentially a stranger, someone who had been maintaining a completely fabricated persona in their relationship while living an entirely different life with multiple other partners. The drive back to his office passed in a blur, with William's mind racing as he tried to process the implications of his discoveries. He realized that every aspect of their marriage had been built on lies and manipulation, that Camilla had been using their relationship as a cover for behavior that was not only unfaithful but also involved ongoing deception of multiple people. The sophistication of her secret life suggested that she was skilled at emotional manipulation and had probably been deceiving him from the very beginning of their relationship. When William returned to work, his colleagues immediately noticed his distressed state, but he managed to deflect their concerns by claiming that he was dealing with a minor family emergency. He spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on his work responsibilities, but his concentration was completely scattered. Every few minutes, his mind would return to the contents of the storage unit and the reality of what his marriage had actually been all along. That evening, William faced the challenge of returning home and interacting with Camilla as if nothing had changed, even though his entire understanding of their relationship had been completely transformed. He knew that he would need to decide how to confront her with his discoveries, but he also realized that he needed time to process his emotions and plan his response carefully. The evidence he had found was overwhelming, but he wanted to be strategic about how he used it to address the crisis that their marriage had become. When William arrived home, he found Camilla in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming quietly to herself and seemingly in good spirits. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal after what he had discovered earlier that day, and he struggled to engage in casual conversation while knowing the truth about her secret life. Camilla asked about his day at work and shared details about her own day at the school, maintaining the facade of their normal married life, even as William knew that everything she was telling him was filtered through layers of deception and manipulation. During dinner, William found himself studying Camilla's face and mannerisms, looking for signs of the calculated dishonesty that had apparently characterized their entire relationship. He wondered how he had failed to recognize the signs of such elaborate deception, whether there had been clues that he had missed, or whether Camilla was simply skilled enough at manipulation to fool even someone who knew her intimately. The realization that he had been living with a stranger for 15 years was almost as disturbing as the specific details of her infidelity and deception. The weekend following William's devastating discovery at the storage unit passed in a strange state of suspended reality. He went through the motions of normal married life, while internally struggling with the weight of what he now knew about Camilla's elaborate deception. Every conversation they had, every mundane domestic activity they shared, felt like a performance in which only one of them knew they were acting. William found himself wondering if this was how their entire marriage had felt to Camilla, a series of scripted interactions that provided cover for her real life. On Saturday morning, William watched Camilla get ready for what she claimed was a shopping trip with friends. He observed her careful attention to her appearance, the way she selected jewelry and perfume, and realized that these preparations were likely for one of her secret romantic encounters rather than a casual afternoon with female friends. The knowledge that she was probably about to spend intimate time with another man while maintaining the pretense of innocent social activities made William feel physically ill. After Camilla left the house, William found himself unable to concentrate on any meaningful activities. He tried to read, attempted to work on some household projects, and even considered going for a long drive to clear his head, but nothing could distract him from the mental loop of processing what he had learned about his wife. The storage unit had contained years of evidence showing that their marriage had been built on a foundation of systematic lies and emotional manipulation. William spent much of Saturday afternoon composing and then deleting potential confrontation speeches, trying to find words that would adequately express his feelings without degenerating into meaningless accusations or emotional outbursts. He realized that the situation required more than just a dramatic confrontation. It demanded a complete reevaluation of their relationship and careful consideration of what, if anything, could be salvaged from 15 years of what he now knew had been fraudulent intimacy. When Camilla returned home that evening, she was in an unusually good mood, chattering about her afternoon and the various purchases she had made. William noticed that she had returned with several shopping bags, but he also observed the subtle signs that suggested her afternoon had involved more than retail therapy. Her makeup had been reapplied at some point during the day, her hair had been styled more carefully than would be necessary for shopping, and there was an energy about her that suggested recent romantic excitement. Sunday brought what William had decided would be the final day of his investigation and the beginning of his confrontation with the truth of their marriage. He had spent the night planning his approach, deciding that he would present Camilla with the evidence he had gathered and give her an opportunity to explain herself before making any decisions about their future together. Part of him hoped that there might be some explanation that could make sense of what he had discovered, though intellectually he knew that the scope of her deception made any innocent explanation impossible. William chose Sunday evening for their conversation, waiting until they had finished dinner and settled into their usual evening routine. He asked Camilla to join him in the living room, mentioning that they needed to have a serious discussion about their relationship. The gravity in his tone must have been apparent because Camilla's casual demeanor immediately shifted to one of wary attention. William began by explaining that he had been concerned about changes in her behavior over the past several weeks and had begun investigating to understand what might be causing those changes. He watched Camilla's face carefully as he described his growing suspicions and his decision to look more closely at her activities and explanations. Her initial reaction was defensive, with attempts to dismiss his concerns as paranoia and overreaction. But as William began presenting specific evidence, starting with the credit card charges and moving through the hotel expenses, the hidden jewelry, and the storage facility key, Camilla's defenses began to crumble. Her face went through a series of expressions ranging from surprise to anger to resignation as she realized the extent of William's discoveries and the impossibility of maintaining her denials. When William mentioned that he had visited the storage unit and seen the contents, Camilla's remaining composure completely collapsed. She sat in stunned silence for several minutes, apparently trying to process the fact that her carefully constructed secret life had been completely exposed. The woman who had been maintaining multiple elaborate deceptions for years suddenly seemed small and vulnerable, stripped of the sophisticated facade that had protected her hidden activities. William gave Camilla the opportunity to explain herself, to provide context for what he had discovered, and to help him understand how their marriage had deteriorated to this point without his awareness. Her response was a mixture of confession, justification, and emotional manipulation that revealed the depth of her psychological investment in maintaining her double life. Camilla admitted that she had been involved with multiple men throughout most of their marriage, claiming that she had never intended for the relationships to become as complex as they had evolved. She described feeling trapped in their marriage from an early stage, claiming that William had failed to provide the emotional excitement and validation that she needed to feel fulfilled as a woman. Her explanation portrayed her infidelity as a response to his inadequacies rather than as a choice for which she bore primary responsibility. As Camilla continued her explanation, William realized that she was attempting to shift blame for her behavior onto him and their relationship rather than taking genuine responsibility for her choices. She spoke about feeling unappreciated and emotionally neglected, claiming that her relationships with other men had been necessary to fill voids that William had created through his supposed shortcomings as a husband. William listened to Camilla's explanation with growing anger and disgust, recognizing the manipulation tactics that she was using even in this moment of confrontation. Her attempt to make him feel responsible for her elaborate deception was perhaps the final insult in a pattern of behavior that had consistently prioritized her desires over their shared commitment to honesty and fidelity. When William asked about the financial aspects of her secret life, including the gifts and apparent support she had been receiving from her various partners, Camilla's explanation became even more defensive and convoluted. She claimed that the men she was involved with were simply generous friends who enjoyed giving her nice things, refusing to acknowledge the romantic and manipulative nature of these financial arrangements. The conversation continued for over 2 hours, with William pressing for complete honesty while Camilla continued to minimize, justify, and deflect responsibility for her behavior. As the evening progressed, William realized that the woman sitting across from him bore little resemblance to the person he had thought he married, that her capacity for deception and manipulation was far greater than he had ever imagined possible. The most painful moment of their conversation came when William asked Camilla directly whether she had ever loved him or whether their entire marriage had been a convenience that provided cover for her other activities. Her response was a long pause followed by an explanation that their relationship had evolved over time and that her feelings had become complicated by her need for experiences that he couldn't provide. William realized that Camilla was incapable of giving him the honest, straightforward answers that he needed to understand what their marriage had actually meant to her. Her responses were consistently evasive and self-serving, designed to minimize her responsibility while maintaining some possibility of salvaging their relationship on terms that would allow her to continue her deceptive behavior. As their conversation drew toward a conclusion, William made it clear that he could not continue their marriage under the current circumstances. The trust that had formed the foundation of their relationship had been completely destroyed, not just by her infidelity, but by the elaborate and sustained nature of her deception. He explained that he needed time and space to decide whether any form of reconciliation might be possible, and that in the meantime, he expected her to be completely honest about her activities and intentions. Camilla's reaction to William's declaration was a mixture of panic and anger. She alternately pleaded for forgiveness and accused him of being unreasonable and unforgiving. She claimed that her relationships with other men were not serious and that she was willing to end them if William would agree to work on their marriage. But her promises felt hollow to William, who had seen too much evidence of her capacity for deception to believe that she was capable of the kind of fundamental change that would be necessary for their relationship to continue. The immediate aftermath of their confrontation was a period of tense coexistence, while both William and Camilla tried to figure out how to proceed. William moved into the guest bedroom and began making practical arrangements for a potential separation, including consultations with a divorce attorney and investigations into their joint financial accounts. He discovered additional evidence of Camilla's deception in the form of hidden accounts and financial arrangements that he had never known existed. Camilla made several attempts to convince William to reconsider his position, but her efforts were undermined by her continued inability to take full responsibility for her behavior and by evidence that she was still maintaining contact with at least some of the men she had been involved with. William realized that even in the face of discovery and potential divorce, Camilla was unwilling or unable to completely abandon the secret life that had been more important to her than their marriage. The final resolution of their situation came when William discovered that Camilla had been making plans to leave him for one of her other partners, someone who had apparently offered her a more exciting and financially secure alternative to their marriage. The discovery that she had been planning to abandon him, while simultaneously trying to convince him to forgive her deception, was the final confirmation that their relationship had no foundation for survival. William filed for divorce the following week, armed with the extensive evidence of Camilla's infidelity and financial deception that would ensure a favorable settlement. The legal process was complicated by the need to identify and recover hidden assets. But William's methodical investigation provided his attorney with a comprehensive picture of Camilla's secret financial activities. The end of William's marriage was both devastating and liberating. He grieved for the loss of what he had believed their relationship to be, while simultaneously feeling relief at no longer having to live with the constant underlying tension of sensing that something was fundamentally wrong. The discovery of Camilla's true nature had answered all the questions that had been plaguing him for months, even though the answers were far worse than anything he had imagined. In the months that followed, William began the process of rebuilding his life and learning to trust his own judgment again. The experience had taught him painful lessons about the importance of paying attention to subtle signs of deception and the dangers of assuming that love and commitment are always mutual, even in relationships that appear stable and secure. William's investigation into his wife's secret life had begun as an attempt to save his marriage by understanding what was causing problems between them. Instead, it had revealed that their marriage had been built on fundamental dishonesty and that the woman he loved had never really existed except as a carefully constructed facade designed to provide cover for an entirely different life. The truth that William uncovered was more devastating than any infidelity or relationship problem he had been prepared to confront. Camilla's secret had not been a momentary lapse in judgment or a response to marital difficulties, but rather a comprehensive alternative life that had been maintained alongside their marriage for years. The revelation forced William to confront the reality that some relationships are beyond repair and that sometimes the most loving thing a person can do is walk away from someone who has proven incapable of honesty and genuine commitment. William's story became a cautionary tale about the importance of trust in marriage and the devastating consequences of discovering that the person you thought you knew best in the world had been living an elaborate lie for years. The experience changed him fundamentally, making him both more cautious about future relationships and more appreciative of genuine honesty and emotional authenticity when he eventually encountered them again.